Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the concluding press conference for the 76th IATA Annual General Meeting. My name is Tony Consul. I'm the Head of Communications at IATA, and I'll be moderating this conference. In it, we have Pieter Elbers, the CEO of KLM and the President of the 76th Annual General Meeting. We have Robin Hayes, the CEO of JetBlue and our current Chairman of the IATA Board of Governors. We have Mr. Carsten Spohr, the CEO of Lufthansa and the immediate past chair of our Board of Governors. And we have our Director General and CEO, Alexandre Juniac, joining us. So we've all heard lots of speeches and discussion. We'll start directly with questions. We've been doing media briefings in advance of the AGM as well. So I'll start by bringing some questions from this morning's briefings into this session, and then we'll wait for other people to type in their questions via the chat function. So, gentlemen, to get us started, perhaps I'll put a question to Mr. Spohr. We had a lot of questions earlier today about vaccine announcements and essentially asking how encouraged is the industry about the development of a vaccine and the potential impetus that could give to a revival in air travel.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I think the industry is quite excited about that acceleration in the vaccine process. We all expected that to be live and active in the summer of 21, and now turns out to be probably half a year earlier. The first vaccinations probably being done as early as the month of December of this year. And I think it's not just the fact that people will be traveling after receiving a vaccine shot. I think it's also that governments will, I think, now turn towards a different approach with light at the end of the tunnel. I think testing as an intermediate step will get a lot more support in the next weeks, building a bridge towards the vaccination of travelers. And I think this was the very important signal of turnaround our industry was waiting now for so long. And also the share prices of the various carriers around the world show it's not only us in the industry, it's also our investors who now see that this industry will get back to its stellar performance, which we had seen from the years before the crisis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spohr. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to that? If not, I'll bring another question that we had from this morning's briefing, which talked about the IATA Travel Pass, a new app that IATA is developing to help manage the flow of information for verification of tests and potentially vaccination. And the question is, what role will that play in the potential restart of the industry, and how optimistic are you about the take-up of that? Alexandre, maybe you want to address that?
I think that this type of app will play a key role as a complement to the testing process and the vaccine process. Because if we want that to be effective and efficient, if we want passengers to be confident and government to be confident in the whole process, you have to provide with the right information, the right certification that everything has been done properly. That's the purpose of this app, is to establish a link between the lab or the vaccine centers or the test centers, the passenger, the airline, and the government. So the flow of information is perfectly identified, secured, managed by individuals, so respecting privacy, but also certified that, and so it is the necessary accessory to all the testing and vaccine system that will be put in place. Hopefully, the faster, the better.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. Does anyone want to add anything to that? No? If not, then another question that came from this morning's briefing, and that concerns the current situation in Europe, particularly the new wave of coronavirus infections. And the question is, how much do you think that will put back an industry recovery? And perhaps we could go to Pieter for that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, obviously, I think the European recovery was somewhat on track in August and September when we saw borders were reopening and consumers were starting to travel again. with the second wave, as from October, we have seen a sort of a negative impact on that, and carriers are taking back some of the capacity they had reintroduced. And with that, looking at some of the global European numbers now, the level is much less. Obviously, the news of the last few days, or the last 2 weeks really, of the vaccine is putting some positive momentum again back into the market. But clearly the recovery trajectory, which has started in the summer, has taken somewhat of a delay in the past couple of weeks. On a more positive note, we have seen that when borders are reopening, when rapid testing is there, when some of the quarantine measures are being done away with, we could see a significant increase again of that. I think the market is really waiting for the opportunity to start traveling again.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Pieter. We have a question now for Mr. Hayes. And that question is, how optimistic are you that the AGM will be able to take place physically next year in Boston?
No, we're confident. I mean, you've heard from Carsten about the promising news of the vaccine. My view is by next June, we have the capability of having a large number of people vaccinated. I think the concept of some of these digital health passports that Alexandre talked about will be by then widely available. And I think we can run a very safe AGM next June.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll put the next question to Mr. Spohr, and it's talking about vaccines and asking how ready is the airline industry to face the challenges regarding the distribution of vaccines, and what measures are necessary to tackle these challenges?
Yeah, I think maybe I give two answers, one on behalf of the industry and also maybe one on behalf of Lufthansa and Lufthansa Cargo. I think we have been preparing for this for weeks now, more expecting this to be happening next year and summer next year than now as early as it will happen. But I think we are ready as an industry. We understand that there's different vaccines. Some will require extreme cooling. Some will require less cooling. But the industry has shown in the past that these cooling transports can be done in a qualitative way, that the quality is checked all along the travel chain. We have been investing, we as an industry, in cooling hubs around the world to allow distribution. And I think the cargo airlines around the world have also used IATA to exchange best practices. This is not about competing. This is about a joint effort on, as Alexandre called it, the largest logistical exercise ever. And let me add a somewhat emotional element, speaking for an airline based in Germany. We talked today about the 75th anniversary of IATA, which was created in 1945. 3 years later, in 1948, our largest city in Germany, Berlin, was locked down. It was depending on an airlift to be saved. In those days, obviously, Lufthansa grounded, no airspace, no aircraft available. It was saved in those days by the French, the British, and the American aircraft available, and the city was saved. To now be part, as Lufthansa Cargo, as a German airline in such an airlift operation, is also very emotional for our people. And I know I don't speak only for our airline, but for everybody in the cargo airlines around the world, and also passenger airlines who will contribute with belly capacities or aircraft which are taken into cargo-only operation, how proud they are to contribute. And it's a way of showing what our industry does to the globalized world in a positive way. So I think we're all looking forward to this in a very emotional way.
Thank you. Alexandre, did you have something to add?
Yeah, we have worked with a lot of partners that are involved in this vaccine distribution in the COVAX alliance. So to secure the whole logistical chain, from the lab which are producing the vaccine down to the hospital or the clinic or the center that will vaccine people. And in this logistical chain, air transport plays a key role, but we have worked with all the other members of the chain. We have issued a guideline and kind of manual to implement the proper rules, regulation, recommendation to ensure that this major logistical challenge will be properly handled. And we have been working on that for weeks now. So we think that we are ready. And it will be an honor to do that for this industry.
Tony, one number to add, which I just learned yesterday, assuming everybody in the world will get one shot of this vaccine, will require 8,000 cargo freighters to distribute this. So that shows you the magnitude Alexandre has been referring to. And again, the industry is ready and is proud for this duty to be fulfilled.
Great, thank you very much. We have another question that has a European angle, so perhaps I'll put that to Mr. Elbers. The question says that governments have not yet accepted or implemented all of IATA's and ICAO's recommendations with respect to testing and restart, particularly with respect to the use of antigen testing. Do you see a breakthrough within the EU on this issue anytime soon? Maybe Pieter will give you the first chance and then...
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think the question is a very valid one. Ever since the start of the COVID-19 outbreak, we have been pushing as an industry for more harmonization of rules, especially within the EU framework. And with all the different countries having different rules and different regulation, it has been really very, very challenging for us as airlines and extremely complicated and cumbersome even for our customers who had to face changing rules and regulations all the time. Obviously now with testing facilities being in place in more and more places and also at airports increasingly being available, we could move to the next step. And I really hope that, and I say, Alexandre said it right, we cannot wait for the vaccine. We should move forward, and these parallel tracks of vaccine on the one hand side and quick testing or rapid testing at airports on the other hand side, I believe is really the way forward. And we would desperately need some European harmonization on those rules, yes.
Okay. Alexandre, Mr. Spohr, did you have anything to add to that?
I think that we should just be fair that also for politicians, this is the first time ever. So I think there's a very steep learning curve, and I think already the last days we received very positive messages from around the world that there's more openness to testing rather than just quarantine. So I think we have seen the turning point in various dimensions, covering the challenges which we as an industry face.
Just an additional comment. We must be aware that the proposal we made in September, to generalize the systematic testing, was very advanced compared to the state of the industry. We were discussing with a lot of labs of pharmaceutical companies, and the technology to have a reliable, scalable, affordable, fast, and easy to operate test, mainly the antigen, was in September, not totally available. It became available 1st of October. So we mustn't be surprised that, up to now, so about mid-November or last week of November, things have not moved so as fast as we would have liked. It's a new technology, so we have to convince on something new. And as Carsten said, to convince government for which it is the first time.
Thank you. We have a question about vaccinations and particularly how that impacts airport and airline workers. So perhaps Mr. Hayes or Alexandre, if you wanted to take this. The question says, will airport workers be a priority to get vaccination given the risk exposure? And are airports and airlines working with governments in that regard?
I think that the determination of the priority vaccination public is a complex issue, because aviation is not the only one or the only industry to be a priority. You can think about, of course, people from the medical, from hospitals, people from education, police, border control, many employees who have a permanent and numerous contact with the public. That could be and it accounts for a lot of people. So in the aviation industry, we have some of our employees who have these characteristics, and we will determine with the health authority, of course, because it's a very trustful dialogue we have with them, how we are going to prioritize the vaccination for the airport employees, airlines employees, and all the aviation people involved in the business.
Okay. Thank you, Alexandre. We have another question about vaccination, and it talks about the announcement by Qantas yesterday that they will require or could require vaccination as part of the requirements to fly. Is that an issue that IATA would take up as an industry association? And if so, is the industry prepared to manage that type of a requirement? Perhaps, Alexandre, you can start with that.
Because the point there is that for the moment, we have had this very good news on vaccine, but it is a bit premature to see when and how the vaccine will be, the vaccination process will be spread all over the world, and the rollover will be done. So what we think is the emergency now is to implement the testing process, because it is. We cannot wait for the vaccine. That will not be fully available before mid-2021, hopefully for our next AGM, first of all. And secondly, we need testing in the meantime between now and the availability of the vaccine, but also we need testing when the vaccine will be there. So the testing is the key priority. Testing systematically the passengers at departure, arrival, airport with a rapid and reliable technology is the key issue to remove the travel restrictions. That is the point I think we should focus on.
Great. Thank you, Alexandre. We have a question, I think probably for Mr. Hayes. It's asking about the priority that the industry should place on environment, and what role will environment play on the industry agenda in the next few years? As current chairman, Mr. Hayes, maybe you want to take that one?
No, I think it's a critical priority for the industry and indeed the planet. If we weren't sitting here trying to navigate probably the greatest crisis, well, not probably, the greatest crisis the industry has ever faced around COVID, we would probably be talking about the issue of the environment and the issue of sustainability more than anything else. It was something that was a very significant issue for us coming into this. And as I think about the next few years, I think navigating the industry out of this crisis and also reaffirming this industry's commitment to sustainability and protecting our planet and the environment are two of the most important jobs that IATA can do.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if anyone wanted to add anything to that on environment. No?
There.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say maybe I can add something there. I think it was also mentioned during the AGM. I think the industry has demonstrated that every crisis has led to new innovation and new initiatives, a new step forward. And I recall vividly at KLM during the ash cloud crisis, we have sort of stepped forward immediately with social media, and it has become a very effective way in communicating with our customers. It was born out of necessity, but created an enormous step forward. So to the words of Robin Hayes, I believe that this deep crisis where we're in now will also further stimulate the industry as a total to move forward in the field of sustainability and to make leap steps forward in terms of sustainable aviation fuel, in having more efficient flying. Some of the political barriers like the single European skies maybe have been blocked for probably more than a decade or two. And I hope that we can make some progress on these sort of long-lasting items now.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question now referencing the Director General of the WHO's comments earlier today. He said that there was no one-size-fits-all solution for all countries in this crisis. And the question is, how does that fit in with the work of IATA and ICAO and the CART protocols in trying to find a global solution to safe flying? Alexandre, maybe, or Mr. Spohr?
It fits in the framework of ICAO recommendation or IATA recommendation or framework, because we are making a recommendation and we let, of course, because it's a sovereign decision, every state to implement. We wish that this implementation and the set of rules implemented by the various states are the most homogeneous and the most similar possible. But we understand that considering some difference in situations between states, there are flexibility in the way it is implemented and in the way states are issuing their requirement. So we try to harmonize, but we leave enough flexibility to adapt to every individual situation. That's the way we try to cope with this implementation.
Did anybody want to add something to that? No? Okay. Then we have a question about the development of markets in the recovery. And the questioner asks whether big domestic markets would be the first to recover, and questioning India, China, United States. And if so, what are the implications for a stronger domestic network than an international network? As it's talking about domestic networks, maybe we go to Mr. Hayes, who's operating in one of the biggest domestic markets around.
Sure, and we've certainly seen that here in the US, where to the degree there's really been any recovery, the domestic market has sort of outperformed international. But I think that's largely because of some of the complexities that come with flying international, a concern that someone might get stuck somewhere, a concern around the sort of the rules and the testing and quarantine requirements. But even in the domestic US, we've seen some of the same things happen. States put quarantine requirements in, states put testing requirements in, both for domestic and international flights. And as we see those types of restrictions go in, it does have an impact on traffic. And so that I do believe that there is a significant amount of pent-up demand for international travel. I think once we start getting into 2021, we start getting into the vaccine program, some of these other sort of digital health passport concepts get up and running, I think it's going to give both individuals and governments much more confident to take a more focused, risk-based approach to this. And that's going to open up markets very quickly. And I think a lot of people who perhaps have put off a trip this year will be getting on an airplane next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Spohr, Mr. Elbers, maybe you want to comment from the European perspective?
Yeah, I think we see in terms of order of recovery, clearly domestic is faster than international due to the reasons explained by Robin Hayes. We see that VFR, visiting friends and relatives, recovers faster than leisure travel, and leisure travel recovers faster than corporate travel. And also, and this is sometimes forgotten, interesting enough, hubs are coming back because the less volume there is, by math, the less sufficient volumes there is for point-to-point services. So traffic is channeled through the hubs in relative terms, again, more often than in the past. So as much as we have seen point-to-point rising faster than hub traffic over the last years due to the fact that there was such an extraordinary growth in passenger numbers, we now see the opposite effect, that point-to-point is suffering versus hubs to a higher degree.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a slightly different take on the COVID crisis. The questioner is asking about whether or not, as the crisis becomes manageable in certain parts of the world, are we going to see route-specific or market-specific measures as the first part, and would that be good or not? And the second part is there a danger that measures put in place in the COVID crisis could become permanent to the detriment of the industry? So maybe, Alexandre, did you want to take that?
Yeah, we'll answer the second part of the question. Is there a danger? Yes, there is a danger that some authorities maintain, the exceptional measures that have been put in place. That the reason why, when we have worked within IATA for the CART 1, for the restart of the industry in May, and for the CART 2, for the recommendation to reopen borders, we have explicitly stated as a prerequisite that all these measures should be temporary and should be limited to the end of the pandemic, or when the pandemic is under control. That's a decision that will have to be taken by governments when they think that it's over. But it has to be temporary and not permanent.
And the second part of the question was, would we be concerned if we ended up with route-specific requirements based on risk levels in certain parts of the world?
I think that for the industry, having a specific requirement and different requirements route per route is pretty complex to manage and could become a nightmare. So that the reason why we are trying to push similar or homogeneous regulation or requirements, it's also the reason why we are pushing in favor of this travel corridor or bubbles. But we have always indicated that they should converge to a similar system, or to a common system that could be manageable from an airline, but also from a passenger point of view. Do not forget the passenger in that picture.
Great, thank you very much. We have a question.
Maybe I add to that. Today we do have precisely that in place. Today there is these route-specific measures in place. Today we do have a lot of countries who have decided their own set of rules and their own set of measures and their own set of requirements when it comes to testing, when it comes to quarantine, when it comes to... So the question is actually a very valid one, because that's the reality today, and for us as operators, as airlines, for our crews, but even more so for our customers, this is really cumbersome. So we need to move to this situation of harmonization and standardization of rules. That also allows us to determine when rules are effective and when they are not effective or less effective. And I think really there the work done by IATA, and I'd like to credit Alexandre and his team to push for that. It's really extremely important for the operators around the world.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question specifically directed to Mr. Spohr. And the question asks, what role will consolidation play in the recovery?
Yeah, I think there's two elements. Obviously, in the short term, I think we see less consolidation, because almost every airline which operates on an intercontinental basis has been supported by governments, and usually this support excludes M&A activities. So I think short term, there will be less proactive activity due to the limitations of this government stabilization packages. On the other hand, unfortunately, there will not be everybody in this industry being able to survive this unique crisis. And therefore, I think we just have seen a pause of consolidation, but the strategic trend will continue. And those carriers who come out of this crisis in a relative more successful way than others will be the proactive consolidators, and others obviously will not. And consolidation is good for this industry, I think, in general. There's just too many players, as we know. And I think, adding to what Pieter Elbers has been saying, I think this crisis, none of us, of course, has asked for, also offers an opportunity for this industry to renew itself, to be more sustainable, to maybe put some of the growth dreams aside. We have seen the last years where tickets for less than $10 have driven growth, which is not the natural growth this industry is really experiencing from demand. So I think as an industry, we also should be self-reflective and again use this biggest crisis ever to, in a certain way, renew ourselves, look at the way how we can add to sustainability, and in the wind, really look back at this crisis as also a huge opportunity to make this a better industry.
Great, thank you. We have a question referencing the 8,747 statistic that you mentioned to carry the vaccines. Just to be precise on that, the volume of vaccines for 7.4 billion doses would fill 8,000 aircraft, but it doesn't mean that we have a fleet of 8,000 aircraft for that. The questioner is asking, how long given that volume, how long does the industry believe it will take in order to distribute the vaccine? Can that be done quickly, or is this months or years?
Maybe I try to be brave, because also Lufthansa Cargo is only a big, but only a player in this industry of a certain size. I think the production capabilities of the pharmaceutical industry will be the bottleneck, and not our industry's capabilities to distribute. Because if those freighters around the world are not enough. We'll be making passenger aircraft available. In our company, Lufthansa, we started just a few days ago to take seats out of passenger airplanes to have more airplanes being available for the distribution of the vaccines around the world. I'm sure our competitors will end up doing similar things. So our industry is ready. I think we'll look at the pharmaceutical industries and, of course, the regulatory hurdles to be solved, and then we are ready to go.
Okay. We have another question asking about the relationship between airlines and airports. Perhaps maybe Mr. Hayes, as the incoming or the current chairman, we can put this question to you. The question asks, has the crisis opened new opportunities for cooperation between airlines and airports? And I suppose we can also add to that, in terms of the vital issue of slot coordination and slot waivers, etc. Are airports and airlines working together sufficiently well enough?
No, I do think the crisis has been extremely good for, I think, both airlines and airports to remind ourselves that we are dependent on each other. Sometimes it's easy to forget that. I think that all airports and airlines, we've looked at this crisis and said this is something we really have to work together on. I mean, to try to restore confidence in our industry, it doesn't work if the airport does it and the airline doesn't. It doesn't work if the airline does it and the airport doesn't. So we've seen terrific cooperation with airports. We really are through this together. And I think we'll be dependent on each other through the crisis. We may be talking about some continued reconfiguration in airports. In terms of slots and the slot waiver, then obviously at the moment in the congested airports, that runs through to the end of northern winter, and beyond that, discussions I'm sure will continue.
Okay. Did anybody want to add anything to that? No? Okay. Then the next question asks a bit about the IATA travel pass, and it's asking about the components, particularly about this idea that you'll have this virtual passport on your mobile phone. And the question is, are governments, is that a standard? Are governments ready to accept that when the travel pass is ready to be implemented?
I don't know if all governments are ready, but we have worked with governments, to try to build this app. We are already working with them, because a key part of this app is the database of all the travel requirements that exist in this planet. That is permanently, collected and updated on a daily, even a second basis by a product that we operate in IATA, which is called Thematic, and which is used by everybody in this industry: airlines, travel agent, border control, everybody uses it. And that's one of the key pillars of this app on which it is built. So we have been working with government; they know us, but for the moment we don't have an open acceptance of several governments on the planet. We are pretty optimistic because we have the elements to gather the acceptance and the methodology and the process and the relations.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question about the relationship or the I suppose the order in which the industry restarts. Given all the excitement about progress on vaccines, are we concerned that governments might back off on being aggressive on implementing testing to start travel? In other words, are we concerned that governments might not implement testing regimes and instead wait for vaccinations before or as the trigger to restart the industry?
But again, first of all, we cannot wait for the vaccine to be deployed to restart the industry. Otherwise, we'll all be dead. And secondly, even if there is a vaccine, the testing is an unavoidable complement to vaccination. To control that the people you are flying in your aircraft is not infected, and so that you are not re-importing the vaccine from country A to country B, viewed from country B. So the testing is a key element that goes with the vaccine, and prior to the vaccine to ensure that we maintain the pandemic under control when we transport passengers from one country to another. That's the point.
We have a question about how, earlier we talked about how airports and airlines were working in this crisis. We have a question as to whether or not this crisis has opened new doors for cooperation amongst airlines. Perhaps, Mr. Hayes, you want to take that question?
I think the industry has a long track record of not competing on safety and security issues, and so I think that that ethos, which has stood us well over many decades now, I think that truly was the case as we went into COVID. We were all in the early days trying to learn more about how COVID was transmitted, about the role of cleaning and sanitizing airplanes, PPE. I mean, we all face the same struggles. And I think, again, I just want to give IATA huge credit, because I think IATA is a forum where all of that comes together for the industry in a very elegant and efficient way. And so it's not just that bilateral and other conversations that take place with different airlines. It's also the resources and the partnership of IATA. I remember in the early days of COVID, Alexandre arranging calls for the board on a very regular basis, and we were sharing information as we were getting it. And so I think, again, that is why I'm very proud of serving this industry. This industry has a focus on safety and security that is unmatched.
Okay. We have a question about government involvement in the industry. Maybe we'll put this to Mr. Spohr. The question is, governments have taken shares in many airlines or are participating in many airlines. As a result of this crisis, is there any concern that that will become permanent? And how do you see the relationship between governments and airlines changing as a result of this crisis?
Now, let me take a positive view. I mean, we as an industry have been talking about our relevance to globalization, to the global economy, at least once a year at AGMs of IATA, and many, many uncountless times in between. So if you now look how governments around the world have looked at private companies and who to save first, airlines have received a wide support. So that importance of airlines, it's not only recognized by us ourselves, where you might say we might not be quite objective, it has been recognized by different forms of government in different parts of the world, almost to 100% degree. So I think that's positive. It shows our importance to the globalized world. There's various flows in the world. There's data flows and there's financial money flows. These might exist without airlines, but the other two flows, goods and people, it needs us, and I think governments have recognized that. The first part of your question, I think, can only be answered by individual governments and individual airlines. There's airlines which even before COVID have been owned 100% by governments. There have been airlines who have had zero ownership and still have zero ownership, but received other forms of support, like in the US. And there's all kinds of mixtures in between. So I think there is no global answer to your question, but my global observation of this unique support for airlines indeed is a global answer.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question about a really important part of the business, which is business travel. How do the CEOs here see the potential for a return in business travel, and how important is that to the industry?
Well, it's no doubt that business travelers tend to pay higher yields and are an important commercial element of especially premium carriers, but also other carriers around the world. In the first months of this crisis, we were all getting excited about video conferences and how great that works and how much we learn about it. In the last weeks, I only hear people getting tired of video conferences and getting ready to fly again. So I think I'm not denying we're using one today about this great, technology. And I'm sure we all be continuously losing this also post-COVID. But I think we all have experienced the limits of such technology. And if I compare today's AGM to all the others I've been attending, of course it doesn't compare. it was missing key elements, meeting new people, feeling the emotions of groups, of, thinkings, of creating new ideas. All that is very difficult by video. So let's be honest, this technology is better than we maybe all knew before the coronavirus crisis, but it's not anywhere as good as what airline provides in connecting people, cultures, and economies.
If I can add to that as well, I also think that I fully agree with Carsten. Business travel will take longer to come back, but it will come back in a significant way. I also think some of the trends that I think we've seen will create new markets for airlines. So, for example, if there are people that work for large companies that can work from home, maybe they move to not be near their corporate headquarters, but are required to attend a certain number of meetings per year. Those are going to be additional trips. People who are working from home but can, maybe take a weekend trip somewhere to see friends or family, but something they couldn't do before when they were required to go into an office. So, the way I think about this is it may well change, but the demand for aviation, once people get over their concern and fear of flying, once governments start to embrace aviation and facilitate travel again, once those things start to happen, I think we all will be pleasantly surprised how quickly this industry can come back.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question about business models and asking, has the experience in the crisis so far shown that certain business models are more resilient than others? We have several business models represented here. Maybe Mr. Hayes, we start with you.
Well, I think, honestly, I think the impact on this, the impact of the COVID crisis has been significant for all of us. Whatever business model you've had, no one has come through this unscathed, and the vast majority of airlines have required some form of government support. As Carsten said, it's looked differently in different environments. I think that as we come out of this, each airline will be looking at its own business model and deciding how relevant it is for what they believe the future will be. And that's what's great about our industry, that we have a competitive industry. Customers have different choices of different routes, different products, different price points to fly. And, so it may well be out of this and you've seen that certainly in the US where both what I call low-cost carriers and legacy carriers have pivoted towards the VFR market that Carsten referred to, because that's a source of demand at the moment. And so I think you're going to continue to see that, and we'll see that how that plays out. But there's no doubt there will continue to be an important role for different business models in this industry. And again, that's something we should embrace.
Okay. Did anybody want to add something to that?
Yeah, maybe just to underline what Robin just said, the various business models in itself we expect to continue, but within these models it will probably a shakeout or a consolidation, or those who are best able to deal with the crisis survive. And if we see for our business model where we run a hub and spoke system here, we can see that many of these smaller flows, which maybe could have served by non-stop long-haul flights, will now be channeled in the recovery stage to the hubs. And to the earlier question on the business travel, that travel will come back. They will travel to the smaller points between Europe and the US, and they will choose for some of these points which will be unable to sustain non-stop flights, will be able to work through the hub. So I believe that the various models will continue to exist there and will be able to sort of recover after the crisis.
Okay. If there are no other comments on that, we're pretty much, actually we're a little bit over the 5 o'clock mark here in Geneva. We have a couple last questions. One would be how I suppose united is the industry in managing this crisis, and particularly this is with respect to the travel trade, the agents, sort of that side of the business. I know, Alexandre, maybe you want to tackle this. For example, at the beginning of the crisis, there were lots of things that needed to be sorted out between airlines and the agent community, in which IATA played quite an interesting role. Maybe you want to expand a bit on that?
But the question is what?
So how is the travel trade and the airline industry making it through this crisis? Are they cooperating? Are they acting as partners?
We are cooperating on a very large basis, day to day, through what we call the BSP ISS network, in which we manage the money that is given by passengers to agent and then flows to airlines. So we manage the whole system. And so what we have done during this crisis is to ensure that this system, that is a very strong guarantee that all the financing element of aviation is properly done, is safe, is secure, is efficient, has been able to continue under extreme tensions, because everybody in the system, to say it short, was short of cash. So it was difficult, and without cooperation, and a very strong cooperation, it doesn't exclude that sometimes we have disagreement, but above all, we had a very strong cooperation with the travel agent community. We managed successfully to maintain this system alive. We have a lot of other contacts with the travel agents through the passenger conference, in which we set up the rules and the regulation and under which we work with agents. So it's a day-to-day cooperation, and it works well. And doesn't exclude some tension sometimes. It happens, but it's exactly what Robin was saying with the airport. We are if I may take the comparison, in the same boat with the agents.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question from me to each of the panelists. When the next AGM happens in June, what do you think the progress of the industry will have been on recovery? Maybe we'll start with Mr. Hayes.
Well, I'm optimistic for next summer. I mean, I think that when I think about the amount of pent-up demand that there is for travel, people have been putting off trips, particularly internationally. I believe that, of course, summer 21 is not going to be as strong in my view as summer 19, but I do think that next summer will be a point of great momentum for our industry. A point where we can kind of look back and see the majority of this behind us. Large numbers of the world's population would have been vaccinated. I think our the testing systems have been getting better. They just get very stressed when case counts improve. We'll have that under control. I think governments will start to value the role of aviation in boosting their economy, because let's be honest, once we get through this crisis, the number one things governments will be focused on is how do they restore the strength of their economy? How do they kind of create back the jobs that they've lost? How do they start paying down the debt? And the best way of doing that is getting the economy fired up and running. And aviation, as we know, is a central part to that. So I think all of these things will be coming together. And of course, we'll still have challenges ahead of us. When we get to next summer, we won't be out of the woods by any means. Airlines will still be suffering from a significant amount of debt and other challenges. But hopefully we can come to Boston and look ahead more than look back.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Elbers, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, besides underlining that I would look forward to be in Boston also coming June. I think so far we have been cautiously optimistic based on the latest news about the vaccines for coming summer. Still well below 2019, but I think in probably 4 to 6 weeks we'll have a better view on how the vaccine and how the speed testing will further evolve, and with that we'll be able to have a more clear view on where we stand coming summer. Again, I think it's very important that we get a lot of reactions from our customers really, who want to go back in the air, want to start traveling again. So if we can do that in a safe and way which is matching all the local rules and requirements, we'll be ready to do so.
Great, thank you. Mr. Spohr, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think next summer we'll be seeing three things coming together with positive effects: testing, vaccination, and maybe most important, everybody I talk to in my circle of friends or my family is just so ready to travel again. They were even jealous that I was allowed to go to Geneva from Munich yesterday. So I think that's going to be a huge push. The industry will see that our customers want to come back to us, and we look forward to welcome them.
And lastly, Alexandre, IATA will be behind you by that time. But how do you see the industry, and maybe how do you see post-IATA life?
But first of all, it will be the start of a strong recovery. We know that after crisis, the economy and this industry recovers generally faster than expected. So I am pretty optimistic. And for me, it's another story. We'll see.
Great. Well, with that, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I thank everyone for continuing to follow the industry in this crisis, continuing to follow IATA's activities and important actions. We have a series of briefings continuing tomorrow. That begins at 2:00 Geneva time. We'll look at the important issues of environment, connectivity, and safety. So I would encourage everyone to please join us for that. And in the meantime, a reminder of the great sponsors that have made the AGM possible. And we hope to see everyone in Boston in a few months' time. Thank you very much.